Thank you for the introduction. I'm so happy to hear that AI and faith is relevant enough for this audience because something super consequential is happening at this intersection of the nexus between AI and belief and AI and faith. And we've been seeing it set up for some time, given the decade of social media algorithms conditioning our thoughts and our ideas. And we've seen that impact. But what we're seeing now is transformative. And that's why I wanted to bring this panel together today. And I'm lucky to be joined by these wonderful gentlemen. But before we do that, I'm going to give you 90 seconds of setup so that we can have a conversation. There are so many topics that would be relevant to speak about in this area, but we're going to focus today on AI as a faith intermediary and what that means in terms of global religions and communities and just, humanity governing overall, what that means to all of us. So let's start by saying that in every tradition in human history, when we sought guidance on life or how we need to morally respond to something, we always look to the heavens. We look to a transcendent force. And the people who interpreted that for us were faith leaders and community leaders. And they helped us translate the divine and the sacred and to think about life in terms of consequences in the afterlife. So today, millions of people are asking those very same questions of AI. They're saying things like, what is my life purpose? Why am I here? What's it going to be like if I happen to die? What does that mean? And they're asking questions like, how do I forgive? How do I raise my children? All these things are really indicating that AI systems are fundamentally acting as spiritual intermediaries. And people are also establishing anthropomorphic relationships with AIs, and we've seen that translate into a loss of reality, loss of connection to your physical world. But most importantly, recently, we've seen children have disastrous consequences by establishing anthropomorphic relationships and losing that boundary between, the physical and reality. I don't know if you guys realize this, but more than 80% of the people in the world actually identify with a religion. That number surprised me. That means that the role of faith leaders is essential in this next evolution. Now, an AI can generate an answer for you. It can give you an insight, but it is not morally culpable or responsible for the answers it gives and the reaction or the consequence that happens afterwards. Now, when you ask a priest, a rabbi, an imam, or an elder for guidance, they are engaging as human beings, and they are responsible and accountable to the community and morally implicated in the advice they give. So fundamentally, AI is intelligence without moral agency, its capability without consequence, and its guidance without responsibility. So what are we going to do about it? And all of this is unfolding in a world where people are already living their lives in different information realities. These realities have been algorithmically shaped by social media, where the algorithm is telling you what to think, what to feel, and actually what to believe, what real truth is. So AI did not create this condition alone, but it's entering it now as a guide of humanity's greatest, deepest questions. So let's explore that. I'm going to engage Father Paolo first, but the question I have for you is, you've been researching moral and theological implications of AI, I know, for more than a decade. And if moral guidance becomes AI-generated, individualized, and detached from responsibility, what holds society together in your view?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a complex question that I try to summarize in a short answer, It's a kind of changing of the way in which we structure the society and the value of the knowledge in the modern age. We are used to, let me put in a broader perspective. Every one of us believes in something. If I tell you, do you believe that the reality is made by atoms? Probably you say yes. Did you see atoms? No. But you believe to a trustable source of knowledge that you can call the physics handbook. Well, what's going on with such kind of tools is that we are changing this way of making some kind of source trustable in a way that is so different than in the last century. With the modern age, we shape such kind of believable source of knowledge thanks you to an architectural displacement of knowledge. You enter in a library, and you have the scaffold of medicine. You have the scaffold of physics, and things like that. And if during the COVID pandemic someone tell you, okay, let's do a mouthwash with vinaigrette, and you will get not sick, you don't put inside medicine, you put inside, okay, don't let me tell a bad word, but that's scaffold, okay? Now, when you chat with ChatGPT, the machine throwing out things to you in a way that is an oracular way. Everything is mixed, and you have to trust it without any referral point. And you know, that remember to me, I'm a teacher of philosophy, to something that happened at the early journey of Western, when we move from mythology, oracular things, to philosophy. Things that could be trustable because they have some kind of evidence. Well, there are religions that are based on the same way of argumenting things. And this is also happening in the religion tradition. So the problem is that we are leaving a way that was consolidated or giving trustability to an unknown scenario. It's easy to say what is changing, that's where we will go.
So, Dr. Mustafa, thank you for being here as well. I know that for the last decade that I've known you, you've worked with children and communities and families. And I wanted to ask you, you've been working with at Arigatu with these children across all faith traditions. But in particular, when a Muslim child asks AI about Allah, or a Buddhist child asks about suffering and gets answers shaped by the training data that come from Silicon Valley, what has fundamentally changed in terms of the religious experience there? Because, you know, how does that impact their spirituality and how it evolves? Because it's been shaped by an AI that has been shaped primarily by Western values. You know, how do you trust that? And there's no way to stop it. I mean, every kid is using ChatGPT all over the world. So I just wondered, from your perspective, your many, many years of working with the faith community, how do you navigate these challenges?
Thank you, Baroness Shields. First of all, as you said earlier in your introductory remarks, that 80% of the global population believe in God through one faith or the other, and there's a plethora of faith traditions, spiritual traditions around the world, where many people living in this world believe in. Now, first of all, faith communities are navigating the AI shift with a blend of optimism and caution. Optimism because AI is now helping faith communities to organize their congregations. It's helping faith communities to go to the crux of the matter, asking questions, to modernize outreach and to reinvigorate the faith. But at the same time, you have AI that is affecting authentic human connections and beliefs. Now, this then becomes a problem. And in my work, I've seen faith leaders, faith communities trying to balance the two. Now, I guess your question is, what should concern us most? And I know there are many faith leaders who don't want to deal with AI out of fear, but there are those that are embracing AI because they believe that it can reinvigorate, it can modernize outreach and do a lot more. And I have just 7. I'm just going to mention some of these concerns. One is that AI has the potential of eroding traditional spirituality. And when we talk about spirituality is always that organic intersection, community-driven process where children actually are nurtured rather than being taught. The second point here is cultural and religious biases. AI is pretty much driven out of the Silicon Valley. Now, of course, around the world. But what is fed in that Silicon Valley? It's pretty much material. It's not driven by all faiths coming together and say, this is what we need to feed into that data set, the algorithms. And therefore, what comes out is going definitely to be biased, and it leads to cultural and religious biases. The third point here is that it's so much individualized, and it kills interpersonal communication, interpersonal skills, and that communal growth. And we actually see children and young people engaging with AI, with modern forms of communication, and it makes them lonely. We've probably seen that the suicide rates for children has gone up because of the plasticity of the mind of an adolescent or a child. They are not able to relate to AI-driven tools as much as we as adults do, and that has caused challenges to them. The other challenges are cultural homogenization, so that there is such dominance from one culture, one religion. Then there is the diminished soulful context that is devoid of there's that void that is created by AI. It has also led to religious decline as much as it has undermined the interpersonal skills that I've talked about, and undermining resilience that is built in children and young people growing up in a faith community.
That's really interesting, because in one of my projects is the Responsible AI Future Foundation, which I chair. And one of the things we're extremely worried about is a knowledge flattening or a cultural flattening of experience. Because if a model is trained only on Western data, and you're from a country that's a growing global South country, how do you know that if you've not produced the training material that's going to make that AI respond in an appropriate way in your environment, how do you introduce that into your community? And these are the risks that we're trying to work with. But I think that brings me to another question for Father Paolo. When I think about what does that mean in terms of society, it's a disordering. And it brings me to a quote by St. Augustine. He wrote that moral disorder begins with disordered attention. So when you have AI that's like grabbing people's attention and moving them into a certain direction and conditioning and culturing them in a certain way, how does that impact, how a religious faith engages? Like, how do you ensure that that disorder doesn't transform, millennia of tradition and culture and spiritual teaching?
Well, we can understand at least some religious tradition, not every religious tradition in the world, but some of religious tradition, let me say, any kind of religious tradition that knows some kind of monastic style life, that go from Buddhism up to Christianism, in a way in which we see the human beings as someone that is disgregated and need to be unified. The experience of being someone instead of being disgregated is one of the core element of spirituality in a lot of different traditions, because this is something that is really, in some way reflecting the human condition. We are used to say a subject, I, myself, and this subject is in the front of every sentence that we say, but we experience that in a noisy environment. One of the last book, the Nobel laureate, the psychologist that wrote Slow and Fast Thinking, Kahneman, was noise. Right. Well, what we produce with digital society and with AI is a lot of noise. And this kind of noise, if you allow me to express in a more philosophical way, is the same matrix of the digital sphere, in which we disgregate the unity of reality in a series of dots. We have an images behind us, but digital make it possible because it's a disgregation of noise of point. Well, the problem is that the human beings is able, among a certain amount of limits, to see the pattern inside the noise. Well, what the AI can do is suggesting other patterns that probably are not true, or could not be true, or could not be aligned to the real ends of the human life, because it's according to someone else, to someone's interest. And this is the real ethical problem here that is connected to the spiritual one. What we are talking about when we say AI is not a neutral space, but is a space owned by economical subjects with their own interest. And here we have we have to cancel a sort of blurring that does not allow us to see that we are not talking about a neutral space. And be able to negotiate such kind of space among the different stakeholders is the ethical challenge here, to give back to everyone the possibility to be the self-determination of their own spiritual journey in their own life. Ethically speaking, we call that justice. So we need another justice that is also touching the ability to have what traditionally used to call spiritual experience in living.
Well, that takes me to the next question for Dr. Mustafa. I'm going to read this so I get it right. So Islamic scholarship has always emphasized that knowledge without adab, without proper relationship to teachers, humility, and embodied practice can be dangerous. So how can AI cultivate the kind of character formation that faiths are looking for? Is this, will this become an integral part? Are we training children to mistake information for wisdom? I mean, there's so much to unpack there. You know, this is really is computation going to become understanding? So I guess I just wanted to throw that out to you to see if you had some insights.
Thank you, Baroness Shields. I'll try and summarize my answer in this way, that wisdom emerges from lived experience, not optimized algorithm. So you can engage with AI, whatever AI platform or tool. If you make mistakes, you can always hit the reset button and go back. But you know, in real life, you don't just hit the reset button. What you do is first of all, you have to face the mistakes that you've made in real life.
Yeah.
And this helps you in building resilience inside out, not in the manner that AI does, that you can, oh, it's so easy, you've made mistakes, so just hit the reset button. But here is more important. You talked about adab, and adab in Islam is more than etiquette. It is a holistic embodiment of humility, respect for teachers, who you interact with, and a practical application that transforms raw information into wisdom. So this is adab. Information is not wisdom. No. Otherwise, if information equaled wisdom, then we would be very wise in this world today. But how comes we are facing such huge challenges in the world today with so much information overload, and all this noise that we actually see? So let me just summarize it this way and how it affects us. AI only superficially simulates aspects of character formation. It's not the end and be all. And part of learning includes relationship with teachers, which AI does not have. And while AI can teach concepts such as humility, true embodiment requires real-world action. Praying in a congregation, for example, is very important for many people, and it creates that communal, interpersonal bond between the congregants in a particular faith. And there's the erosion of critical thinking. Now, that is key. You find that we no longer are critical in the way we are addressing problems. Now, AI has contributed to that erosion because it pretends to give you all the solutions, but some of the solutions cannot just be given by AI. It has to be lived, and you have to build on it. And lastly, designing AI for human-led education rather than replacing it is important. We need AI, but it cannot replace the human-led education.
That sounds like a very strong act of resilience from the faith community, which is great. I wanted to take the question next to Father Paolo again. The Catholic Church has navigated many a revolution, and you know, technological disruption like the printing press, you know, the broadcast media, you know, radio, then broadcast media, then the internet and digital technologies, social media, and now here we are with AI. So to varying degrees, some have been successful, some have been more challenging. I think the last 10 years, I would say, just in my work with the church and the faith community has been really a challenging time with social media, especially with the harms and crimes that happen to children. But I wanted to ask you, what's different this time? Like I know you did your PhD, you finished in 2009 on AI, so he was way ahead of the game. And I think it's interesting that the Vatican had an AI priest, somebody to champion it way back then. And I think it's really important, but what is different about this moment, and what do we need to get right in the faith community?
Well, first of all, on myself, I'm much more practical looking at myself on natural stupidity than not on artificial intelligence. But okay, the question answering to this question in front of Maria Reisa, that is a Nobel Prize that pay on itself, what does it mean, 8 on social space? It's, we need to look at you for what you did. But to make it things a little bit broader, so if you ask me what the church is saying in the 2 millennial history, there was a changing point, and the changing point was the printing press. That was a wonderful thing because we start a permanent renaissance. This is what Eisenstein and other scholars highlighted. The printing press was the first model of industrial revolution. When you start to print a book, everyone has his own piece of the work, and a lot of positive things. But McLuhan said that something changed forever. If you go to a monastery like mine, I'm a Franciscan. We are 1,800 year old, 8,000 year old, 800 year old. So you can see one book, and all the friars look at the same book. We have one text and one interpretation. When McLuhan, as McLuhan said, when we have printing press, everyone has his own book and has his own interpretation. And modernity arises when we say that you have the right to have your own interpretation. Now, with the last AI that is able to change the text, we can change society in which everyone has his own text in a way that is different from the other one.
Yeah.
And we make encyclopedia at one point to crystallize a source of knowledge. If I have my text, you have your text, you have your text, where is the truth? Or in which way we can stay together as a society? Well, we know, because we passed through the falling down of Roman Emperor, that when the binding of society fall down, well, dark medieval time can arise. So we cannot give for granted that some conquest of the humanity on the human dignity will be transmitted to the next generation without such kind of mechanism. And we say that there is a human dignity with French Revolution, the last century with fascism and Nazism show us that we cannot give it for granted.
True.
So there is something that is really important, and we are the generation that has to decide if we would like to move it to the next generation or let them pass through a really uncertain and troubled or possible troubled horizon, because we was not given to give to them what does it mean, human dignity, and how to defend it.
I think you've both illustrated, yeah, absolutely. I would just like to close by saying I think you have both illustrated the importance of bringing together faith leaders with the builders and creators of AI. Not in one of those dialogues where it's just like, la, 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 we've had a conversation. No, this is about norm setting. This is about sharing that wisdom of the ages and bringing that perspective. And it's, none of us know how this will evolve. And this is by no means a way in which, faith is trying to interfere with innovation. What we're trying to do here is understand each other, because civil order and society and human flourishing and empowerment and agency all depend on how we get this right with humanity. So I want to thank you both for your perspectives. I want to, hopefully the audience will hear from you. We will be trying to engage this conversation in the next year. And so we may be in a city near you. So we look forward to talking with you and hearing your perspectives, faith leaders in your communities, along with the builders and creators of AI, for a real dialogue that makes an impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you to you for
Thank
what you are doing
very
for
much.
us.